Good evening and welcome to the Second Supper Club. We are continuing our series on the 7 deadly sins, and we are covering the deadly sin of gluttony tonight. Ian, why would that be?
Because it's November. My favorite holiday is in November.
And it is
Thanksgiving. Do you know how many turkeys we eat at Thanksgiving, Clover?
I do not.
You do?
I don't.
It's on your notes.
Okay, I know. 46 million turkeys are consumed in America,
It's
in the
like
United
730 something, 730 million pounds of turkey meat.
Million pounds. I feel like that after Thanksgiving dinner.
Unbelievable, yeah. So, great month for gluttony, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gluttony, as we're thinking about these sins, gluttony, the basic definition, first of all, is just to overindulge in, could be more broad, could be just, anything, but we're going to stick with food.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get into gluttony, just to kind of remind us all that when we talk about these sins, we're not talking about just the misbehavior and the bad behavior and to feel guilty and bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is about ways in which we become alienated or separated from God, from each other,
Mm-hmm.
from ourselves. Yeah. And that's the deeper layer that we want to talk about, and the 7 deadly sins are the ones that traditionally are the ones where we are likely to fall in when we feel alienated,
Mm-hmm.
that we're likely to end up with one of these.
Those
So
categories.
that's a better, a healthier way probably to think about these
Right.
sins than just
Right.
beating ourselves up about it. So
what would be a good definition of gluttony?
well, I think if you just stick to overindulging in food, that's all we're going to talk about food, and we're just going to keep it simple.
Okay.
Right?
I think food is a hard thing to talk about because it's connected so much to, at least in the United States, to body and to body image and to our feelings of guilt for overeating and our obsession with dieting in this country, and of course the reality that there is so much hunger in the midst of a nation that is the wealthiest nation in the world.
For sure. It's complicated. So just thinking together about this, thinking theologically about it. Why is there food? Why are we built this way, right? Certainly the first layer is just, it's fuel, it's nourishment.
Right.
That food keeps us going. But even that, it sounds we're so used to it, it's so obvious,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a part of our life. To step back and to be mindful of the miracle that is, that the earth produces food, that our bodies are equipped to process it. It's just something to be mindful of. This is pretty darn amazing. So at the basic level, it's just about
Nourishment.
fuel, right? So second level is that it tastes good, and that's so great that it's this is something that's pleasurable for us to enjoy food. It's like, thanks God for making it something that's not just bland and dry for us.
Right.
But then that brings up all these other issues, because in addition to the kind of the cultural stuff, these overlays of, this one message of eat all you want, and another message of don't eat at all, and we have to wrestle with that. Within Christianity, we also have that kind of conflicting sense that this is made by God and it's pleasurable and a gift, but we also have a lot of guilt around that as well, of any excess. And there's the whole story about St. Francis used to put ashes on his food as like a spice. He would sprinkle some ashes on his food just to keep it from tasting good.
Great at a party.
Yeah, fun guy.
So, and the last thing about one of the gifts of food is that food binds us together in community, that food creates intimacy and love and friendship. Think about your friends.
Sure.
These are people you
share
most
meals.
likely share meals with. Jesus shared meals with his disciples, and he was accused of being a glutton, being gluttonous, because there was an enjoyment there, but it indicated that there's something powerful about binding people together.
Think of all the stories around food with Jesus, right? He's bringing fish to the disciples, he's feeding the 5,000. A lot of stories in the Bible around food, and even communion, which we have institutionalized, has its origin in a meal, right? Sharing a meal with
Those
his friends.
early Christians, their identity was developed around home groups, home supper clubs,
Even our supper clubs.
community building.
We decided, as part of when we were going to build community, what better way than to create supper clubs. And we know some of you are brunch clubs and breakfast clubs, but it's around food.
No running clubs.
Yeah, you have to have food.
Yeah,
It's a part of it.
Good job.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
All right. What's next?
I think that we should talk about one way that food binds us together and gives us an identity
Sure.
or a food
Sure.
practice.
So what's a story or a food part of your heritage that's
Right,
meaningful
significant.
for you? Yeah.
So my family, my mom's side was Ukrainian, and we always had pierogies as part of, always had pierogies and kielbasa as part of our family identity. And my mom handmade pierogies. It's just a ritual and practice, and still does. When she comes to our home, she makes 200 every
No, really?
handmade.
Do you know how to make?
I tried once.
Uh-oh.
Not so good.
God's calling. My story
Yours?
is, my family's Scottish and English and on my dad's side. And so when I was a kid, my grandmother, for special treats, especially for my dad, because he grew up eating it, was roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. And, Yorkshire pudding, roast beef's pretty, straightforward, but Yorkshire pudding takes
it's tricky.
you gotta get the bubble right, and, and my mom could never get it quite right.
I tried
The way my grandmother did, yeah. So we don't have it much, but that sticks in my mind as a powerful meal memory, yeah, so.
The last thing that we want to talk about, or very quickly, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about gluttony in an age of such hunger in our world and in this nation. Again, we live in the richest nation in the world, and yet 1 in 9 kids don't have enough food to be sustained in their nourishment, and millions of people in the world go hungry. Again, not enough food for just basic nourishment.
Right, so how do we, as we think about that as individuals, as we reflect on this sin of gluttony, to also look at it at the macro level as a culture, in what ways is this built into the systems? How in the world do you even think about having a huge meal on Thanksgiving when so many
46 million turkeys,
yeah, when so many are going to go hungry?
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one. This is a really hard issue, both for folks, to remind you that this is not about beating yourself up around gluttony. This is just a hard issue for any of us to think about our relationship to food individually, and then you've got this other layer at the macro level. So, so some questions.
Some questions for tonight?
Yeah. So, first one is kind of the question that we asked ourselves or asked each other. What's a food or a memory that you have that's part of your heritage or part of a special memory for you? So,
that's a good way to get into the conversation.
Yeah.
And secondly, how does the sin of gluttony, this is a little more vulnerable, play a part in your life? Is it an issue? Do you struggle with it? Talk about that.
Yeah. And then the third one we thought of was to take it to that macro level, think about, have some discussion about this culture that's on the one hand so overindulgent and I think really is gluttonous and is guilty of the sin of gluttony as a culture. What do we do with that as Christians in our world where, as we said, 1 in 9 people go hungry? It's tough stuff. So, but I think a really rich chance for conversation tonight. So,
Great.
All right.
Have a great evening.
Thanks.